Hi everybody. Before I get into my video, I want to thank all my subscribers out there for just being so patient. In the beginning of the year, one of my goals was to put out more videos. And in January, I uploaded 2 videos, but things happen in life that kind of alters our plans. In February, my mom passed away, and it hit me harder than I ever expected. And it kind of made me reevaluate what's really important in life. And it really boils down to family and friends who sticks by you, support you through the tough times. And you guys are my second family, so to say, my woodworking family. And I just want to thank all you guys for your comments, your support through my videos. I know that you guys are not just saying that because you're getting free content, but I really feel like you guys really do care about me as a person. So I just want to thank you for your support and for your comments. It really uplifted my spirit, and it makes me motivated to want to come back and make more videos for you guys. So I hope you enjoy this one. In my previous video, the 5 cuts to a perfect crosscut sled, I received a few comments and emails asking me, what is this big wooden box over my fence for? Well, I use it for a few things. When I'm making small, thin cuts, it's almost automatic that I reach for my auxiliary fence for support. So if I was going to make a thin cut, like say 1/8 of an inch, I can probably still use this fence because there's still enough height here that I can rest my push stick against while making my cut. Now I know there are jigs out there that you can put on the outfall side of the blade to use as your stop or a spacer. For instance, if I was going to cut 1/8 of an inch strips, I would set my jig, I'm just going to use this as my example, 1/8 of an inch away from the blade. You take your stock, you put it up against your jig, set your fence, and make your cut, and then repeat the process. Now for me, this is a little bit time consuming. And every time I move the fence, there's always a risk of losing a bit of consistency. If you're comfortable using this method, then by all means use it. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, in my sculptural rocking chair class, we cut 1/8 inch by 2 inch strips to bent laminate onto a form to get a rocker, like this. Now, if I set my fence to 1/8 of an inch, and try to make this cut, your spidey senses should tell you that this is insanely dangerous because I have hardly any fence to support me through the cut. Even if I have my spacer jig on here, this still would be a very dangerous attempt. But with my auxiliary fence, I have plenty of height on the fence to guide me through the cut. I also feel much safer when the blade is actually closer to the fence. The only way I can get cut is if my hand gets between my blade and my fence, and the chances of that happening is very slim. But if I have my blade exposed like this, now the chances of me getting cut is much greater. The trick to cutting these 1/8 inch strip is to have a clean, sharp blade. You also need a 0 clearance throw plate and also a push stick. You don't want to use a chewed up push stick like this. You got to have enough meat on the heel to be able to push that piece through. If you don't, the second that blade cuts through, that piece will come shooting back at you. There's a nice little jig out there that I think everybody should have in your shop. This is a magnetic featherboard called Grip Tight. It's made by Mesa Vista Design. It will keep your board tight against the fence, removing your left hand away from the cutting area. So as you can see, With a nice sharp blade, I can go straight to glue up. Now, if you're not comfortable cutting it this way, then don't do it. You can always take it to the bandsaw, cut it a little bit thicker, and then sand it to size. Now, I also use this jig to cut stock for my ebony plugs used in green and green style furniture. I've often asked, how do I cut small pieces like this? I cut stock for plugs as small as 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch, or 3 mil by 3 mil for my Blacker House chair. When cutting small stock like this, I do modify my push stick. I cut the heel down just a bit smaller than 1/8 of an inch. I want my push stick to be resting on top of my piece, supporting it. I don't want the heel to be sticking up like this because there is no support here. And when the blade comes through, there will be some chatter, which might result in miscuts. Now, I know some of you might be saying, this requires a lot of material, time and effort to make a big old box just for cutting small parts. Well, when it comes to safety, you really can't put a price on it. And besides, I use it for other things. When I'm making taper cuts, whether it be for a raised panel door or just adding a little detail to a box top like this, this top goes with this box here that we make in our fundamental class and also our box making class. With the taller fence, it just makes it a lot easier and safer. Now, if this doesn't convince you the value of this jig, I also use it for trimming edge banding. When I'm making a piece of furniture using marquetry, I like using MDF, especially for door panels, because it's stable and it has a smooth surface for gluing up my veneer. I never use solid wood because there's a good chance that it might move or twist on me, and when that happens, the door will never close flush. So when using MDF, it's almost standard practice that we glue a solid piece of wood, 3/4 by 3/4 or 18 mil by 18 mil as an edge bander. This way, when we install the hinges, we're actually screwing into solid wood and not MDF, which is basically sawdust. When making my edge banding, I like to cut it to 3/4 inch by 7/8 of an inch thick, or 18 mil by 20 mil, just a little bit thicker than my stock. If I try to cut it to exactly the same thickness, it's almost near impossible to glue it up flush. Once you apply the glue, it's going to slip and slide when you're trying to put the clamps on. So by cutting it a little bit thicker, as long as it's sticking out, I can clamp it up and trim it off later when it dries. So how do we trim off our edge banding? Well, like most people, I grab my router, also grab a flush trim bit, and I walk the tight line. Now this is a little bit nerve-wracking for me because if I ever tip my router, my cutter will actually cut into my edge banding and ruin my edge. I have to cut it off and re-glue it again. Now you can add a support fence on here. That would help from the tipping, but you still have to worry about the grain direction. If you're routing with the grain, well, that's great. But if you're routing against the grain, you got to take small bites and go very slow because you always have the risk of tear out. Being in production, I thought there's got to be a better way. So my first thought was, what would be the best tool to cut it the fastest and the cleanest? And I chose the table saw. Now, since I already have this jig made, what I did was on the other side of the fence, I cut a rabbet 7/8 of an inch high, 1/4 of an inch deep, or 21 millimeters by 6 millimeters. So I'm going to position my fence right over the blade so that it would just barely disappear underneath my fence. I use my push stick for testing and keep tapping my fence until the blade stops moving. A little bit more. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to make a test cut. As you can see, the blade just barely touches the push stick, burnishing it, but didn't cut into it. So if you're happy with the fence adjustment, just push your piece through. Whatever's underneath here will get cut off. Now I know some of you will still say, well, I don't use edge banding. I don't touch MDF or plywood because all my projects are out of solid wood because I'm a real woodworker. Psst. Okay. But do you make box joints? What about dovetail joints? Well, how do you cut off the excess joint? Right here, baby. So do you see these protruding finger joints? Well, all you have to do is just put your box against the fence and just run it through. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my hand tools and I look for opportunities to use them. I also like getting the job done quickly. If I was going to do this by hand, it's going to take some time. And also, when it comes to plywood, I would probably shy away from using my hand tools on it because, like I said in my previous video, plywood is just horrible on tools. So if you're going to use it, just keep in mind, you're going to have to sharpen your tools a little sooner. So, here it goes. So you have to admit, this is much faster than using a hand plane. And one of the things that when you're cutting this side here, just remember that this side you already cut flush, so it's not sitting flat anymore. It's sitting at a slight angle, like this. I'm exaggerating, of course. So the corner is actually sticking farther into the fence, and if you cut it like this, you're going to cut a little bit more off than what you want. And that's the advantage of having a taller fence, because everything is referenced off of that. So when you're making this cut here, just make sure that you're up against the fence before you make your cut. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and got something out of it. Again, thanks for watching and for your support. I'll see you in the next video.